Good morning. Good to see you. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? I want to introduce our guest here today. It's Dr. J. Bauer. He's a graduate of Taft University in 1982. He was in the pre-med program. In 1986, he graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson Dental School. He has a dental practice right down the road in Woodbury, private practice. His staff of 10 employees allows him to enjoy the profession of his childhood dreams, to be a dentist. He is presented for 3 multicultural weekends at Colgate University over a 3-year period from 2010 to 2012. He's been a lecturer at the University of Connecticut at Waterbury campus on the topic of diversity a couple of different times in 2011 and 2013. He's spoken at the Gunnery recently, last year, as a Martin Luther King presenter. He has his son Jordan with him. Jordan played basketball, football, and baseball at the Gunnery, and he's studying pre-med at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. So let's warmly welcome Dr. J. Bauer.
Robert, I thank you so dearly for that wonderful introduction. I would like to extend that gratitude to the students of Taft, faculty, Headmaster Willie McMullen, and Jamela Lee for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Upon your arrival at the auditorium, you may have asked yourselves, what brings a local dentist to see us this morning? What possibly could he have to say aside from the usual discussion on dental care? Rather, I'm here today to guide, inspire, but most importantly, to teach, to lend insight on why it is necessary for us as a community and an academic institution to embrace diversity. Why it is so important for a school as prestigious as the halls of academia I passed through this morning to foster and encourage continued dialogue on this very subject. Not just once a year or twice a year, but ad infinitum, to help us arrive at a hopeful cure for that desolate word called racism. We continue to see at times in the national media when America the Beautiful was so ashamed of herself that there wasn't any bandage that could hide the scars of the racial infirmity that she had suffered. As we try to recite, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty," we sometimes had to take pause. Was there actually a pursuit of happiness? It deeply saddens me when I see how racial prejudice, both black and white, causes our nation to take on a violent and tumultuous path. It is plausible that a lack of dialogue and communication fosters a growing nation that is not prepared to embrace diversity. If it wasn't, then I wouldn't be here this morning. As you will soon see, this debate reminds me too much of my past, and if left unfettered, it will continue to instill a sickness that will permeate throughout our society, eventually eroding and destroying the moral fabric of mankind. How am I so sure that this will happen? It's because I personally witnessed its virulence and pestilence within my own family. Yes, the ills of segregation, Jim Crow, and yes, judging by the color of one's skin rather than by the content of their character has left an indelible sadness upon my family, in particular, my father's family, that affects us still to this very day. Just need a little help here with the audio. Sorry, with the video. Can the tech person help me out here for a second? I'm just trying to advance the slide. Dr. Martin Luther King, on that infamous day of August the 28th, 1963, when he gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, warned us of an America that held to a higher standard the color of one's skin rather than by the content of their character. I stand before you today to illustrate as living testimony, utilizing my family as a template of what can and will continue to happen if we do not embrace the love and faith that Dr. Martin Luther King tried to instill in all of us with his testament of hope. But most importantly, it will teach us that the destiny of mankind, both black and white, is inextricably intertwined, and that we need to join hands rather than to point accusatory fingers so that together we can reach the promised land. So listen attentively as I tell you one of our family's most astonishing stories that will illustrate the consequences when we judge by skin color rather than by the content of your character. My father, who was born in 1937, and myself in the year of 1960, were raised and grew up in the same town of Palmyra, New Jersey. Palmyra was a blue-collar town that was located in southern New Jersey. On the surface, it appeared like any other hard-working community that aspired for the betterment of their family. As ironic as it may seem, however, Palmyra had an inherent indelible line segregating white from black. Yes, there were two sections of Palmyra that existed then and sadly still do to this very day. Black people lived in West Palmyra, while white people lived on the east side. As ironic as it may seem, while I grew up in the black section of Palmyra, my father, who was born in 1937 and is also African American, was raised and lived in the white section of town. How did this startling revelation take place, especially in the late 1930s? The answer would eventually be a direct assault against Dr. King's words of freedom and diversity, a conundrum that our family still holds out hope for resolution, a problem that I need your assistance today in extending its understanding. Pictured here in the center with the mustache is Peter Saar, my great-grandfather, who came to the United States from Germany in the early 1920s. The name Saar is a very rare name originating from the Tsars of Russia, but primarily representative of the people residing along the Saar River Valley. Peter and his wife Anna Kaufman, whom I do not have a picture of, came to the U.S. to start a new life and family at this time. What is noteworthy and significant of their German heritage is the swastika pictured on the side of the truck that Peter was standing in. And what is even more interesting is whether Anna, with the last name of Kaufman, was Jewish or not. To date, my father has been unable to verify her ancestral origin with photos or documentation other than the fact that she was German and came here with Peter. As they began their family, Peter and Anna had a daughter named Lillian Saar, my grandmother. And since the name of Saar was a very rare name, my father gave that name to me as my middle name, and I in turn gave it to my son Jay. My father stressed how we needed to retain the Saar name within our family ancestry because of its importance and relevance. Lillian eventually married John Albert Bauer and had their first son, my Uncle Fred, who is present here in this photo with them. Not too long after the birth of Fred, however, a damaging train accident would befall John Albert, and because of this, he could no longer have intimate relations with Lillian. As a result, Lillian had affairs with 3 other men, resulting in the birth of 3 additional sons: Jack, James, my dad, and Harry. The only difference, however, with that was that my dad's father was African American, and because of this, there were serious ramifications that would later develop from this relationship. With many years of research, my wife and I have tried with exhaustive persistence to find the identity of my father's dad. According to my mother and aunt, we discovered that his name was James Layfield Young. And on the night my father was born, there was a large race riot in the town of Palmyra because a white woman had fathered a child from a black man. It was rumored and verified by stories from my great aunts and grandmother, who knew the black community very well, that James Layfield Young was found and murdered on June the 30th, 1937, as his death certificate confirms the exact day my father was born. It isn't surprising why this story has been very difficult for my father to discuss. It's been debilitating and too exhaustive for him to debate openly. All along, I think my dad knew the truth, but was very remorsed and reticent to openly discuss its painful beginning and ending. And when asked at length about the identity of Jack's and Harry's fathers, he didn't have a lead or a clue. At this time, let's just stop for a moment and place ourselves in the year of 1937, a period of time when diversity wasn't discussed and embraced with the same openness that it is today. A period in history when you had a little black child growing up unmistakably within the confines of segregation and Jim Crow, even within his own home. It was an arduous task at best for my father to grow up in. So much so that during the holidays, and especially at Christmas, my father was sent upstairs to the attic so he would not be seen by other friends and relatives. Even to have his hair cut, he would have to venture to the black section of Palmyra because the white barber refused to trim his hair. And I remember quite vividly one year when we were celebrating Jordan's, my youngest son's, birthday. He slowly turned to me and quietly said that during his childhood, he never remembered one candle, one cake, nor one gift. I looked into his eyes with amazement and could see quite clearly that my father as a child never had a birthday party. As we continued to grow up in Palmyra, my father rarely mentioned the names or existence of Fred, Jack, or their families. Because my father was part black and African American, my Uncle Fred and Uncle Jack completely ostracized us from their family. The only remaining brother and direct relative of my father's family who remained in contact with us was his brother Harry, or our Uncle Bumpy as we grew to know him. He would visit us without consternation and spend quality time with our family. At this time, Lillian and Albert had passed on, and Harry was the only living relative my father had that acknowledged us. He would later marry my Aunt Jeannie and have a daughter, my cousin Cindy, with whom we still remain in contact with today. Harry, however, would later succumb and die from injuries suffered in the Vietnam War. And with his passing, my father was now left on a desolate island of racial servitude. Because of his skin color, any remaining contact with Fred or Jack was forever severed. Left now only with my Aunt Jeannie and his niece Cindy, they remained as the sole connection to my father's family that originally came from Germany. Over the years, as I grew older, my father would tell me more of this story. He knew very little of the last residences of Fred and Jack, but I would not allow this to deter my search. In time, it became a personal quest to find my white relatives. If somehow I had an opportunity to speak with someone from their family, maybe with time and education, the content of their character would have improved with seamless transparency. I held out hope that the testament of Dr. King's dream would reveal itself with all the glory of his promised land. But I kept running into one dead end after another. I truly thought that I would never find them until one day last year, in the spring of 2014 to be exact, a Susan Bauer from North Carolina called my office. In the same manner that I was conducting my research, Susan Bauer was doing the same to find our family on Ancestry.com, but kept hitting the same roadblocks that I ran into until she came across the name on the internet that piqued her interest. A name that read Dr. James Sar Bauer, D.M.D. The name of Sar was her clue. That rare name many people didn't have, especially when associated with the last name of Bauer. She left her number with my receptionist so I could call her when I had ample time to speak. That evening, excited and with great anticipation, we spoke of our families and why it had taken so long for us to find one another. Yes, I have finally found and spoken to my first cousin, Susan Bauer. I soon learned that she had a brother named Christian Scott, whom again I had never met. After speaking with her at great length, I sent her many of the pictures that you have seen here today, and shared with her the same story I revealed to you this morning. I also gave her my father's number so she could have a conversation with her long-awaited uncle. She was amazed and astonished. Her initial response was that her dad had lied to her all of these years, proof that yes, she had relatives who were African American. Although on the outside we were a different color, what lied within was a content of character that had genuine genetic similarities. That, as Dr. King had articulated, that despite our color differences, our destinies shared a common thread sewn by the hand of God. The next day, after speaking with Susan, she emailed me again and thanked me very much for the truth that she had been seeking. Up until that day, her father had told her that my dad was Harry, and that he had died without ever marrying or starting a family. In essence, my Uncle Fred wanted to bury the very existence of our family so that the real story would never be known. Thank goodness he had a very inquisitive daughter named Susan Bauer. So for the following week, we exchanged additional information. And she said that her family in North Carolina was having a little get-together that coming weekend, and that she couldn't wait to share her newly found relatives and stories with them. I took a deep breath and hung on to those very words with great trepidation, because my greatest fear would soon be revealed when she sent me an email titled, "Final Email." I had a feeling what the message was going to say, but I had to read it for any type of closure. Dear Jay, after discussing the story with my family, which I know now is true, and despite the shortcomings of my father, we must still honor his wishes. I thank you for clarifying the truth about Harry Bauer and your father, as well as my Uncle Jack. You have a wonderful family, and I wish you the best. But at this time, we should cease and desist on any further contact or emails. I'm saying goodbye and God bless. Your cousin, Susan Bauer. I sat at my computer screen, stunned but not surprised. I realized that this could happen. But the sad part was that after so many years, at the age of 55, this was an ending that I hadn't hoped for. Astonishing as it may seem, again, skin color would continue to segregate our family. I sat there and just shook my head with disappointment. As I continued to gather myself, I looked at the picture of Dr. Martin Luther King that rested upon my desk, and I said to myself that I'm not going to let anger make me something that God never wanted me to be. So I started to type my final email response to Susan. Heartbroken, yes, but never defeated. I informed Susan that hopefully the world will change one day when all of mankind will embrace the essence of diversity. That I would continue to utilize our family history as an instrument not of hate and distrust, but instead a syllabus of humanity, taught with the concepts of love and freedom to students like yourselves, so that hopefully we'll be free one day. Yes, you, my Taft students, future teachers, doctors, lawyers, leaders of our nation, I have come to address with the hope that you will carry forth the story I have told you and the dream of our great Dr. King, so that one day we'll lead a parade of freedom to the promised land. So that one day we'll look at one another not as black and white or brown and yellow, but with the same transparency as the color of water, that hopefully one day freedom's words and spirit will resonate with the passion of Dr. King's victory over racism, articulating an adulation that reads content of character rather than the color of one's skin, with the hope and faith that God's love of all people, from the base black to the treble white, resonates with significance on God's keyboard, so that we'll emulate together a symphony of freedom that cries out with the eloquent poet William Cowper, 1788. Fleecy locks and black complexion cannot forfeit nature's claim. Skin may differ, but affection dwells, and black and white the same. And were I so tall as to reach the pole, or to grasp the ocean at a span, I must be measured by my soul. The mind is the standard of the man. In closing, I hope people can change, and that we should never close the door on tomorrow. Because on January the 9th, 2015, almost 1 year ago today, my father called me and said, "You'll never believe who sent me a Christmas card." Pausing with great reflection, I awaited his response. The name of Susan Bauer echoed through the phone. No return address, he said, but she did send a picture of her and the family that included his brother Fred, signed Susan, with a warm, thoughtful note ending with "Merry Christmas." I'm just going to stop here for a moment. This is the person I spoke to on the phone, Susan, and that is her brother Christian. And the baby in the first picture I showed you, my Uncle Fred, this is him today, whom I've never met. And this is Susan's daughter, and that is Susan's sister. I did not know she had a sister until she sent this picture. I was very excited because Susan was very reluctant at first to send any photos of her family after we first spoke. At least now I would know what she looked like. When I shared my story initially with Dr. Henry Louis Gates of Harvard University, he told me to be patient. In time, things may change. He was right. At least I had a picture. Responding to my dad, I told him, there's hope. A testament to the hope that Dr. King has always professed if we give change an opportunity to evolve within our lives. A change that will bend the light of freedom towards the dark corridors of hate, illuminating a path paved with love and togetherness. And who knows, maybe someday Susan and I will truly have the opportunity to see one another and bridge the gap of discrimination, not just for our family, but for all of mankind. And with Dr. King's faith, the seed of love and devotion I've planted in you today will grow and blossom into a tree of hope. Again, I thank you, my Taft students and staff, for allowing me to share my story and dream with you this morning. Keep the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King close to your heart and make a difference. Take care. I love you all.